Hi, everyone. Dr. Marlo Payne Thurman here today. I'm here with Michael McManmon, who is a member of our advisory board and has been a friend and colleague of mine for many, many years. And he's talking to us from the perspective, kind of first person accounts of autism, particularly as that plays out as we start getting a little bit older. So, Michael, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you being with us.
Thank you, Marlo, for having me.
So tell our audience, and by the way, for those of you who have heard Michael speak before, and he has several sessions in our library, bear with us. But for people who've never heard Michael before, Michael, can you tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, just kind of your story? Because I think that's helpful for people who have never heard that before.
Sure, I'll just give you the abbreviated version. You can purchase my autobiography if you want to read the rest. But I grew up in a large family, 9 children. About, I'd say, 2/3 of them were on the spectrum or had mental illness or learning disabilities. And they say when you read the books on autism that we're like little professors. I was like a little psychologist. I sort of knew what was going on. And I would just thought, why doesn't that one do this? Why doesn't the other one do that? Why aren't they doing this? So I sort of saw through it. And but I didn't see my own stuff, obviously. And I appeared pretty neurotypical because when I went to school, I didn't want to stick out. So I wore what they wore. I tried to hang with the kids that wouldn't torment me, to get in with them. So I was pretty successful at that, staying on the edge of the tribe, and so I wouldn't get abused by them. And school academics were never a problem for me. I think probably should have been a couple grades ahead, really. It's not like it's not just being smart ass. I mean, I really was.
Right,
Just
really bright, really a good student.
yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So I wasn't motivated to do the work because I sort of said, what's the purpose of this? Everything I questioned, especially math. What am I going to ever use it for? I mean, the basic math, yes. But when I got beyond that, it was very difficult. Anyway, so I grew up in this family, got out of there as soon as I could. I thought, okay, if I just do everything the opposite way of them, I'll be all right. So I had
Well, and I
these,
think you can mention there was a lot of dysfunction, some
oh yeah,
abuse in that
yeah,
family. So we'll throw
yeah,
that out there
yeah.
for people who don't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, and problems. I mean, just like I always describe it like a black and white film inside my house, and then stepping out. I don't think I missed a day at school because I wanted to get out of there, even if I was sick, and I didn't know if I was sick anyway. A lot of people on the spectrum can't tell if we're ever sick.
Right.
We just work through it, right?
Yeah.
And
Poor interoception, like not knowing how your body really feels. Yeah.
I still do that, so
Hmm.
it's difficult for me to stop and rest. So I decided to create this big family of 6 kids, and I started working for human service agencies because when I was in college, this is the key for people, younger people, is really doing a lot of volunteer work. And did an orphanage. I met my wife on that little station wagon, going to that orphanage on Saturdays. I decided what I wanted to do in my life, going to that orphanage on Saturdays. I also did other kind of community service. So those steered me toward what I knew I wanted to work with kids.
Hmm.
So I got a job right out of college working in group homes and different types of facilities for all kinds of emotionally disturbed and autistic kids and everything. And about, that wasn't too long, 3 or 4 years after I was out of college, well, maybe 6. I started my own group homes in Las Vegas, 3 of them, and I owned all 3 of them. And I was pretty good with my resources too. That's part of the spectrum, for some of us anyway. And so then I really got tired of the lifestyle in Las Vegas and with my children and everything. So I moved to Massachusetts, worked for someone else, which was a disaster, and then got back in business with myself when I developed CIP, which is College Internship Program, which has been around for about 40 years now, believe it or not. And
And very successful, really served hundreds,
yeah,
if not thousands, of individuals
yeah. And
across those programs.
how that really happened was sort of curious because it was in the beginning where autism was coming out in the mainstream, and there was Stephen
Right.
Shore and Kathy Pratt and all these people that were sort of forerunners, right? In the US at least. And I got them all on my board. And I created a curriculum and I went in there and showed it to them. And I expected them to tear it apart. And I said, well, and there was nothing that they could find missing. And it was sort of like an idyllic curriculum to cover every area: sensory integration, social emotional, social thinking, everything. And I just included it all, and I made this comprehensive program. Well, I'm sort of the first graduate of my program, is what
That's
I
right.
say, because I had to sort of learn it all, and while I was creating it, and so that was really good for me. And then when I finally got, diagnosed about 15 years ago, that's when I started the autism programs, 17 years ago, I guess. And I was already operating a program for multiple types of disabilities and things.
Mhm.
And so, and my children understood my diagnosis immediately, and they said, that explains this and this and this. And they just started telling me all these things, stupid things that I did my
Well, and
whole
I
life.
think it's interesting when you talk about how your staff were like, you know, you have autism, right? And you were like,
Yeah,
really? I just thought I was
actually,
working in the field.
if you're older and you haven't been diagnosed and you're watching this, read Temple Grandin's book, Thinking in Pictures. And then the last two chapters is where it hit me. And my staff told me, she came in, she said, Michael, you're going to be bored with the cows for the first 10 chapters, but go to, finish it and go to the last two chapters. You'll see why I gave it to you. And she was totally right. I didn't know I was so highly a visual learner. I really didn't know it. And it would have helped me in education. Like you're asking, what would I do over with if I knew that? I
Yeah.
would take visual notes. And I did a presentation on visual note taking once in England, but just like cartoons. And guess what? I can draw one little picture and I can remember everything he's saying for the last 15 minutes in that one little picture. And that's how I would remember everything if I had taken notes that way. My notes were useless to me the other
Right.
way. Anyway, to get to the bottom of this, so I now have 19 grandchildren. I retired. I am living in Mexico. I've been writing a lot of books and poetry and art and doing all kinds of things, traveling the world. And really, I've allowed myself to be out of the box totally and just be my real true self and form friendships, have fun. And I'm going up to see my family in a couple of weeks. For a couple of weeks, I'll drive around 3 states and see them all. And so I feel like, and my memoir is called The Best for Last because I feel like God has saved the best for last for me.
Yeah, you had a rough start. So it's
Yeah.
interesting that, and by the way, I've
Yeah.
read this book, and Michael has a really beautiful life story here. And I think that's part of why what you have to share today is so important. And so, a couple of themes that you've talked about is kind of late diagnosis. And, some of us really were on the spectrum the whole time. We know the autism diagnosis has changed through the years a little bit in terms of what that criteria looks like, and we're getting better at recognizing autism across all levels of functioning. We used to have that really severe, never leave home, never be able to have a wife or children. That was 25 years ago. We know that's not true anymore, and we know that population still exists, but we also know there's a lot of individuals on this spectrum who've really struggled their whole life and maybe never even been diagnosed. And I think you were kind of talking about that too. So, but anyway, so we're really going to talk about today, and thank you for that story. And it's interesting because I've heard your story lots of times, and every time I hear it, I learn something new. But I think today we're really talking about kind of your perspective on really being an older adult on the spectrum and kind of what changes you have noticed and how you think that experience may be a little different than other people age. And by the way, there's a lot of commonality, but there's some things that are kind of different in
Sure.
autism as we age. So let's kind of jump into some of that.
Yeah. First of all, I want to say that, you don't ever outlive your autism or grow out of it.
Mhm.
So, and it's easier if you've worked on it and you understand what you're going to go through socially, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and everything. And then you work on it. Like I go to the death cafe, I have everything organized for my death. So those kind of skills work really well when you're older, your organizational skills and things like that, if you have good executive functioning skills. But the other things still persist, the lack of social ability and stuff. And so you can, the very gifts are also the problem in older age. And you're still going to have the cognitive rigidity. If you notice grandpa, or, if you've been around your grandparents or some people, older people in general, I mean, poor Joe Biden, you saw what happened to him in his debate, it's like you start to lose your abilities. And
Yeah,
so,
cognitive flexibility, really. You get less
yeah,
flexible as we age. We all get less cognitively flexible.
and you try to control things more and so that is a problem for us already. So it can be a bigger problem unless you take action against it. And I mean, to proactive means, and I'm going to go through a whole lot of those. But also the other thing is just, the rule-bound behavior is the same thing. And so the strategies I want to talk about today are how to reduce anxiety, reframe your circumstances, enhance your resiliency, and keep becoming a self-change agent. I do things every day I've never done before. And I'm getting really good at doing things like that. This morning I published my partner's book. It took me 10 minutes on Amazon, and I had everything. I worked online with this woman to help him get it all set up. So I'm saying these are really really highly motivating situations for me. It makes me feel like I have some self-esteem. So self-reinforcement strategies, how do you reward yourself for what you're doing so that you can continue to grow and change? And especially honoring our sensory issues and needs as we get older. They're not too much different, and we can make some decisions that will be highly detrimental to us. As I've been reading about bone, muscle mass and bone mass, you can lose a lot of it if you do the wrong behavior in this, in your last decades. You can be really dysfunctional. And so I could talk about that because I've learned a lot about it. And then making commitments to yourself and, stretching yourself in your, so those are some of the things that I wanted to talk about. And now a good model for us, and I urge you to look at it after this, is there's so many videos out there on the blue zones. And I've looked at every one of them because I'm very curious about it. I've done my own little research project
And you're
about
saying
it.
blue as in the color, blue zones?
Yes, these are
Okay.
the zones, like in Japan, there's one in California, Italy, Greece, where people live to 100 years old. Many people in those areas. And there's one in Costa Rica, I think. And they're all in different places, and they're eating different foods. And some of them have alcohol, some of them don't. And what are the common elements? Now, my research, it's not, published or anything, but from what I can see from all of them, the biggest one, and I talked about this at my men's group on Monday with the guys that my partner doesn't understand why I want to go to that meeting all the time. There's a couple of them I have a week. Just picture a little guy in Italy walking down the mountain and having cappuccino with his 4 friends and maybe playing a little mahjong or whatever the hell they play, and spending an hour or two with them, doing that a few times a week. That is to me, that is the main key to these people living over 100 and having some family around
And
them.
Michael, is that because of both the social and the kind of mental flexing,
Well,
or what is that? Why do you think that's true?
Well, that is the main part. The other parts are the walking down the hills and up the
Right. So the
hills.
walk.
The
Okay. Yeah.
walking. The other part is, and that doesn't have to, and you've just, in our structure, I think some, muscle, some weights, or 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, things like that, and exercise. And then the other part of it is that they eat a good diet. They only eat protein so many times a week, but it's natural, like proteins and fresh vegetables and things. And they might have wine or sake or whatever but they don't over like get drunk, And so a spiritual aspect, maybe being connected with friends and neighbors and having some spiritual ideas in your brain. Doesn't matter what religion again, except we don't know if these exist in the Muslim world because we haven't studied there, but they probably do. And in China too, So let's get down to what you can do. Okay. And I've been taking this on like a science because that's my ask me brain, right?
Well, and you've had some time to really work on this for yourself. And that's why we were really interested in interviewing you on this topic, because I know this is something you've really focused on for yourself for the last few years specifically.
Well, the bad news for us in the US culture is that elderly people are pretty much disrespected. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's true. We're sort of like wallpaper. And I noticed it immediately when I left my business, when I would go back to visit. It's like, okay. And it's sort of like your ideas and everything are just like, passe or
Right. You're
something.
too old to have a
Yeah.
contribution now.
And,
Yeah.
I've decided to break that mold.
Good for you. I
I've
think we all
published
need
three,
your leadership on
yes,
that.
I've published 3 books in the last
Mhm.
4 months. 2 books poetry and a children's book that I wanted to write for
Plus
since
your
I was,
painting, and we'll comment that
and
the painting you see behind Michael is one of his own
yeah,
original paintings.
that's New Zealand. And I didn't do it there because it's too big, but I did it from a photo. And what was I going to say? So yeah, doing art.
Mhm.
I have a YouTube channel with 10 episodes on it already. I'm, so I'm stretching myself in every way. I had 2 big problems with my computer a couple weeks ago. I said, I'm just going to write and Google it. How do you fix this? How do you do this? Until I got it. And it took me days, but I got it. And I was very reinforced by it. So not being afraid to take a challenge on.
Mhm.
And okay, so we didn't talk too much about we talked about food, healthy foods in general, good proteins, good vegetables, good fruits, not overdoing the sugar part of that.
Or the
And
alcohol you mentioned. Yeah.
right, too much alcohol is a problem too. And being of course I don't smoke my whole life, so that helps a little bit. And a lot actually. And then really like I said, building muscle mass by doing some upper body, I do about 25 push-ups and I
Mhm.
do weights for about 5, 10 minutes, just really
Mhm.
quickly. And then I do just standing at the counter. You just go hold onto the counter in the kitchen, go all the way to the ground, then come back up and push on the counter. Do 20 of those, and then just a lot of walking. And I don't get crazy with it. I try
Right.
to do it every day. If I miss something, I just make up for it. So that's the physical part. The social part is like I said, having outlets. So one of my goals, these stretches I was talking about, is that I've had a couple of friends who don't respond to me. And I said, I put a lot into these friendships. I would remember I'd give them a painting like that on their birthday. I'd remember Hanukkah or Christmas with them, and they don't respond. So I said, okay, I didn't ditch them and say, screw them. I'm not being friends with them. I kept them as a category called peripheral friends who I can once in a while, if they actually contact me, I'll go out to lunch or coffee with them or do something with them. But I decided to get other ones that were more dependable. And so like next week, I have a lunch date with a guy that is a writer who I really like him and come to our men's group. So we're going to have a lot to share. And he's actually reviewing my screenplay on Ireland for my roots,
Mhm.
the first 60 pages for me. So he's going to go through it. Anyway, so the socialization, we have to do it. I used to tell my students, there's no mail order bride that's going to show up at your door. You got to ask a girl to coffee in the student lounge at college, or you have to initiate and do that for a while. There's no A to Z, get in bed routine like you see on TV. I guess it
Yeah, we
happens
talked
for,
about that a little bit in your last session.
yeah,
Um,
and with older people too.
yeah.
Okay, well, because I see it down here, there's a lot of older people down here, and a lot of widows and widowers, and especially widows, and everyone has their emotional needs to do that, and to be with someone and to have that partnership and things. And a lot of people on the spectrum would rather be alone. It's much easier. I can tell you, I've, this is my fourth relationship. I'm not proud of that, but it's because of my social problems that it's
Mhm.
happened. And I'm resilient because I say, okay, let's get back on the horse. And but I can tell you, it's hard to deal with a partner or a spouse. They
Right.
leave their underwear on the floor, or they don't put things away when they cook, or all kinds of things can happen. And if you're structured like I am, that can make you a little crazy. So
Right.
what I have to do is prioritize my feedback. What's the most important thing? So I just did that with my partner. We had made a commitment to having only two street dogs because I moved to a new house and I have to walk these dogs on a leash to the park.
Right.
They can pull me down, and
Right. You get
I
too many dogs going. Yeah.
and I'm not getting. And my partner brought home a third dog, and I said no, no, and he's thinking that he's going to change my mind. And so my friends and my this is how the socialization works. My friends on my online group that I do, my Zoom group, said, why don't you do this? Offer to do one of the things he wants. There's two things he really wants. And then tell him, but the other one he can't, you're not going to do. And
Mhm.
so I did it. I said, which one is the better one? So he wanted his aunt to clean our house on Saturdays. She's very nice, very good cleaner. But I was thinking, okay, it's family. I'm going to have a problem. But I said, okay, I'll accept your aunt, but we're going to sit down and go through because I don't want another, wife.
Right. So this is the trade.
Right. And then, but you have to get rid of the dog. And it worked famously.
Right.
So, anyway, I'd say that is listening. That's from socialization, it's from listening to people and being open to feedback and trying to problem solve and not being rigid. If I had just told my partner, no, I'm not doing anything you say, and that doesn't work really well in a
Right.
relationship. So promoting communication is really
Yeah.
important. One of the things I do with everything, like I went out in front of my building there. I have an art studio and a casita. And yesterday the internet guy was here to hook up a separate system there. This is an example. I've learned to speak Spanish for 7 years. So I had to go in there. And first of all, I had to tell the contractor yesterday to have the electrician come again today. So he got him to come. I had to explain to the electrician that there needs to be wires that go to these two TVs, one in the art studio, one in the casita, and that there's none there existing under the walls for the casita. So
Mhm.
there's two electrical plugs. He can eliminate one and come through that line for the TV. I'm doing all this in Spanish, and he got it. And I have to be assertive enough to do that and communicate not just in English, but in Spanish and
Right.
sign language. And so I'm saying in everything I do, whether it's my contractor, the electrician, my spouse. So one of the things we do, and you're talking about as you get older or in a relationship, is we have check-ins, and we do this. We sit down. We like to do it in the morning after breakfast, and we sit down, look at each other in the eyes, maybe take each other's hands, and then we say, "How are you feeling?" Or what
Right.
do you have to do today? Is there anything I can help you with? What's going to happen
What
for
are
the
your
week?
needs? Yeah. What are your needs?
Anything big coming up this week that I should know about? And so we have these check-ins because we're avoiding those negative things that happen. Like I told you, and now I'm blah, 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 and you didn't do this. And so we want to avoid problems, right? And that's where being proactive and being structured as an
Mhm.
SB can help you.
Right.
Even make a schedule if you have to. I do a schedule for my stretches sometimes where I put them all down. Like I'm studying Spanish. I'm sorry, Spanish, French, and Italian. And I do a little bit every day. And some days I forget one or the other, but I used to chart in the past where I just check off. So that's me, I'm driven, right? But
Yeah.
most
So
people
let
are
me
not.
jump in a little bit because there's a lot of themes flowing around here, right?
Yep,
But what I'm really one of the ones I really want to kind of hone in on, which I think is kind of underlies them all, is that, and by the way, I think this is something you maybe know about yourself, maybe don't know how rare it is this idea that you drive yourself to be more flexible, because I think you said it best. People with autism tend to get more rigid as they get older. They tend to get more set in their ways, and they tend to not necessarily do the things that allow them to kind of have the life that you have, which is based in health and based in, some of the relationships you're trying to expand. So in other words, you're trying to still at your age really push those boundaries out. So let's talk about that a little bit. Talk about why in autism that's hard to do, and talk about also why it's important to do it and how you have been successful doing that in terms of flexing yourself.
sure. I can remember when I was first diagnosed, trying to just say hello to my staff when they came in the building or say, how was your weekend or anything. I would walk right by them. So I put a golf counter on and I would give myself a click after I had an interaction with one of them. And so I could see if I could get 10 clicks during the day. So that's what I had to do to remind myself. You also put a
So in other words,
timer on.
you had to create a behavior program for yourself to start
Exactly.
doing that. And it came from awareness that you needed to do that. And then some kind of a systematic reminder that
Right.
to teach yourself how to do that.
And once you internalize a lot of these things, if you keep adding them on, they chain together.
Right.
So
That makes
for,
sense.
and I think I mentioned before that I eat breakfast in a different spot in my kitchen every day.
You said that in your
And
other
yeah,
session, and
and
you
I
do
eat with
that
my
even though it's
left
not
hand.
comfortable, right? In other words,
I
it's not
use,
comfortable to do that.
but I just remember it every day now. And I use my left hand to eat breakfast, only breakfast, but I use my left hand to eat breakfast. And I've noticed that I can paint with my left hand now and do other things with my left hand, which takes the pressure off this one because I use it a lot on the computer
So here's the
and
question. Was
things.
there a point when you knew you needed to intentionally force yourself to flex outside of these rigid patterns that you had
Well,
established?
yeah, it's pretty humiliating to be in my fourth relationship in many ways, and I have financial losses from that too, a
Yeah,
lot that I really paid off everyone really well. But the point is that that's humbling and it makes me think, okay, you're not you're when I get a signal that I'm starting to see the other person say the same things that the other three people said,
right.
then that's what I needed. I'm a slow learner.
Was that rigidity? In other words, were those complaints based on your rigidity?
Yes.
Okay.
And
So, in other words,
yeah,
that was the trigger when you started hearing multiple partners talking about that you're too rigid and that's a problem for me in this relationship.
it comes up in all different ways, right?
Right.
And so that's when I decided to prioritize feedback and say, okay, what's really important to me? Can I put up with this? And what do I really, and because I wasn't speaking up, that was the other part of the problem.
Right. Not advocating for yourself. Yeah.
I wasn't communicating when something I really didn't like was going to happen. And I didn't say, no, I don't want that, or I don't do it. And
Right.
so
You
that's
were
what I just gave you the
compensating.
example
Yeah.
about the maid and the dog, right? I
Mhm.
wouldn't have spoken up about it. I just would have kowtowed
Allowed the
and
other third dog and let that dog tip you over.
make me crazy,
Yeah.
And so that's the problem. I wasn't standing up for myself and communicating enough. So I think it's really important to force yourself to ask questions and that's the thing. Here's the deal. We have a rule for our students at CIP when they first come. We say, all questions and all answers are intelligent. And your job for the first few weeks that you're here is to ask questions. And even if you have to ask the same question 12 times in a row
Get it
until you
answered. Yeah.
understand it, so do that because you're less intelligent if you don't get the answer. You're making yourself ignorant of what you need to do. So why would you do that on purpose to yourself? So don't be afraid to ask questions. And so that's another thing that's helped me with all of this contractors right outside the door here. I told them before, I said, you have to be quiet at 1 o'clock. Al uno, silencio. So you can't be using the drills. You can't, and I figured I was going to meet outside, and I said, no, I got to come inside and close the shades and doors and put everything on. So, because I knew that they're yell and they do everything, and that's part of their work.
Yeah,
So
and one
being
thing, let me jump
proactive.
in because I
Yep.
want to tell our audience that Michael told me he was moving the last time we spoke. And since we interviewed him last, he's moved into a completely new house,
Yep,
literally within what, a week from now?
I guess so. And well, it's
And
been
was
3 year.
able to organize that move and get moved in and be in a place where you feel comfortable enough that you could do this interview. So in other words, this is a pretty successful example of how Michael's flexibility and his ability to challenge those difficulties of rigidity and autism has allowed him to really branch out and live a more complete and full life. Would you say it that way?
Yes, and I was going to say that this is a 3 year project here, and I have documented the whole thing, and it'll be a YouTube episode from an empty lot to, bamboo going 30 feet high and a swimming pool, everything, art studio, you name it.
So you
And
built
so,
this house, is what you're saying.
yes, and guess what? A hell of a lot of communication in Spanish with people that, trying to figure it out or using my cell phone to translate. Because believe me, if you don't get it straight, you're going to have a door where you don't want it and
Right.
a toilet, whatever, all kinds of things. So it was really, really important to use communication skills. I wanted
Right.
to mention a couple of the things that we didn't talk about, which was environmental and motor planning concerns as you're older. We have cobblestone streets here. I make sure I have really good like hiking boots that have good grips on them. I have a
You don't want to fall.
bicycle
Yeah.
bicycle with fat tires that are really good. I do things like that. So, because it's just natural that you're gonna, as you get older, you're gonna fall probably and have problems. So, being able to keep your body in a way that you're flexible enough, if you do fall, that you don't get really hurt, is an important thing too. And just to answer your question more fully about, why am I this way? And I think people have this propensity on the spectrum to use their organizational, their wonderful intellectual skills to overcome these problems. They have to have the willingness for once.
Right.
That's the biggest thing. When we interviewed students for our program, we wouldn't take them if they weren't willing to accept their diagnosis. Or even if the parents wanted them in there, if the kid was like adamant, we would, no, sorry,
Mhm.
because we're not going to fight them. We'd rather work with a student who is motivated to change and grow. Change is the entry fee to a new life. And when they become teaching someone, it's like the adage, don't give someone a fish, teach them to fish. Well, teach them to be a self-change agent. I think that's probably I'm a model of self-change. That's true.
Right. And that comes with self-awareness, though. In other words, you can't be self-motivated until you're self-aware. And I think that's really, you've always had kind of an intuitive sense of something's not right. Maybe I don't know how to fix it, but something's not right from the time you were little. You've talked about that.
Well, you can't see it, but I bumped into enough walls, maybe. That's really what
You're,
it is.
so would you say that that's a good part of the aging process in autism is
Well,
that
well,
you finally
yeah,
do gain a little bit more self-awareness, or do you think that's because
yeah.
you think that's unique to you?
You can, let's put
You
it that
can,
way.
but not necessarily have to.
But if you don't get depressed enough by these, like losing my marriage, my first marriage was a huge
Mhm.
depression for me. Well, how did I do this? How stupid am I? My self-esteem was in the gutter for 10 years after that. And I wasn't diagnosed till way after that, but you see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
the depression, our sense of failure when we try to do things like go to a cocktail party and we don't know how to socialize, and we start to talk about computers or whatever, and everyone walks away from us. This is really detrimental. So having to, like, awareness is the key, right? And willingness, those two things you have to have. And then you have to have the ability to get the hell back up on the horse and say,
Right. And I think that's where you're really an example of that. And I think
yeah,
that's the hard step, right? That's the hardest step in a way.
I've pre-taught that to myself. So even if I lose this relationship, I'm already ready to
So in
get
other
up.
words, you already have a backup plan if this relationship
Not
doesn't
a
work.
specific person,
That's not good. I don't
but
think you should tell your partner that.
I know I said if he watches this, he's going to say, what? But he understands that. What I mean, if he dies, I'm not going to like go into mourning for the rest of my life and
Right. In
never.
other words, you
So,
already kind of figured, you worked out the logistics if this one doesn't work.
well, in my brain, I've said, I
Yeah.
get to live, I get to thrive no matter what happens to me, you
You know,
know?
that's a key point. Can you say that one more time for people who weren't listening?
Yeah.
Because I think that's really critical.
I deserve to live and thrive no matter what my circumstances are.
Absolutely.
Misery is optional.
And
And
it's a choice.
so, and here's the problem. I bring most of my misery on myself
Mhm.
through my social and other actions. So that can be even more depressing for a person because you screwed it up and you're the common denominator in all your problems. And
Right.
so that's been the biggest force I've had to work against with all the depression and anxiety and stuff in my family is
Right.
myself. I could go to self-hatred, but I don't.
Mhm.
I keep a positive attitude and accept reality every day and work on positive outcomes and stay.
Well, and I think the other thing I've learned from you through the years is that it's not something you just don't magically do it all tomorrow. It's incremental, tiny, tiny, tiny little steps in the direction you want to be every single waking moment of your day. And that's really what I think you're saying. So
Exactly.
talk about what talk about that. Do you write that stuff down? Do you have it in your head? How do you keep track of those little incremental things that you're working on?
Okay. Well, now I don't need a list because I just have a menu and I just do them all. But
Right.
let me just go through real quickly. There's like 40 of them. There's maybe 50 of these, but I won't say them all. I'll
Okay. And
just
by the way, Michael's content is you can find the written summary of this content associated with his speakers page for those of you who are
Yeah,
watching.
so we'll put it on the page for
Okay,
you.
that'd be
But
great.
I mentioned a few like eating with my opposite hand, sitting at the table, different direction, walking slowly in the house in the dark. I memorize how many steps there are, and I
You'll
can
really
come
have
back.
to do that now in the new house.
Yeah, well, well, let's talk about that. How hard it emotionally my transition was the first few days moving in here with
Yeah.
everything a mess, boxes,
Everywhere. Yeah.
and the people working around me, and water went out, electricity didn't function in these rooms. That could make you insane. I had to do special things for myself during those days.
Right.
And then my partner brought this extra dog into the mix. I was ready to like go off on that, but I didn't because I knew I had the self-awareness that I'm overwhelmed because of the environmental changes I'm going through right now. Airports, right? For people on the spectrum, same thing.
Right.
So drive on a street you haven't driven on before, and there's plenty of opportunity here for me to do that. Or walk down there's like 40 little tiny little restaurants within blocks from
Go
here.
somewhere new. Yeah.
Just try one. I tried one a couple weeks ago. Best burrito, and they don't even make burritos in Mexico. It's in the U.S. food, by the way. But best burrito I've ever had. It's delicious. You know,
So
yesterday
good find. And it may not be a good find, but it's still important to try. Yeah.
my neighbor cooks outside on the road with a whatever a tent every night, tacos, and it's like 2 feet outside my door. So I only lived here 3 days now. I went out last night, introduced myself to all of her daughters, talk to them in Spanish, how to make me a plate I already had eaten. And it was 70 pesos, $3.50 for 4 tacos. You put everything in the world on them. And I've been eating them today. But what I'm saying is that's me being willing to go out and extend myself and try something new. So, get off the computer every half hour, stand up and shake it out and stretch, or a TV or whatever. Um, use a candle in the morning when I'm getting up instead of the lights. I use a candle and keep it quiet for like about a half hour. So there's like all these things can help you manage stress, low yoga, meditation, um, relaxing your muscles as you're sitting. On an airplane, I often do that. I relax myself and just try to just relax and calm myself down.
Mhm.
I don't know. There's like, I can go through them all, but there's, play some music every day. One of the things that's developed by accident with my partner is when he's here, we are on our computers, maybe in different parts of the house. And one of us will put on swing music, and the other one knows that's the cue to meet somewhere and start dancing. And we
Right.
just goof,
That's
goof,
cute.
goof around for like 5 minutes, and we don't even know what the hell we're doing. And one of us will fall down or something, and then we'll laugh, and then we go back to what we're doing. So it's just little things like that that keep your brain functioning, keep your humor, your sense of humor, your love of life. These are so important. If no one's going to do it for you, you have to get up off your arse, turn off the sports or the politics. I watched the debate last night, so I will do that.
Mhm.
And then I got up in between and did things, but so I could get some, I wouldn't sit there for 2 hours. So I think that it's really, really highly important to, if you can't remember these, then to write it down and make a list for yourself and try to do them every day. And then if you don't do it, who cares? There's a
Right.
really nice,
Yeah.
there's a really nice book out called, oh my, I don't know if it's going to forget it. Um, some Atomic Habits, and you can
Did
get
you
it on
say Atomic Habits?
Atomic Habits.
Okay. Yeah, I've
You
heard
can
of
get
that.
it.
Yeah.
You can get it on Audible too. So I said, "What can this guy tell me?" But I said, well, "I'm pretty good at doing it." But he really is really good, and he said some of these things I do, like the 25 push-ups, I might forget them till right before I'm going to bed, and I don't want to do 25 push-ups at 10 o'clock at night or something. But he said, just do one to show yourself that you've won, that you can do it. Just do one and don't lose to it. So I end up doing the 25 because
Yeah.
once I'm down there, I'm not going to just do one. But the point is that just, what's it? If you just start something, you're 50% there. So like having a vision about something you want to do, I have a lot of these things I want to do. I'll tell you something really I did this morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. I went, took the dogs in my van because it was raining a little bit to the park, 3 blocks. There's a little dump there near it. There's old upholstery from like car seats, like fabric that someone pulled off these because they wanted the metal. I took the upholstery and some of the mesh and wires and put it in my van. And what I'm going to do with that, this is my SB brain. I'm going to make a fashion out of it, like a jacket and with sleeves on it and stuff. And I have a little Mexican seamstress who can help me. And I'm going to put it we have a fashion show that we're having down here for the Arts League. And we are going to have it in March. And it's going to be in that show it's going to look like couture. So this is how
That's
my brain
exciting.
works,
Yeah.
right? I'm gonna have like 10 projects like this. I made light fixtures for my house from the construction materials, that the metal that was left over. I rented a shop with the guy that does the work. Rented him too for the day. Went in there, dumped all my stuff on the street in front of his shop, and we made light fixtures and I made a sculpture. And so that's what I'm saying. I'm free on the planet. I challenge all of you who are listening to this to not, just go for your dreams, do them. little, you don't have to do the crazy things I do, but just do the little things that you always want to do. Start writing your memoir, start doing the little things, or writing poetry, or doing art, or whatever it is. That's going to help you stay alive and happy, and take care of your body, and you're going to have, you're going to see the difference.
Right. And Michael, I really appreciate this topic because it's true for all of us, right? In other words, every person on the planet needs some of this. But I think you bring a really unique lens to this because you're saying in autism, we have a tendency to be even more rigid than other people. And therefore we get stuck into our habits, and that can make our life not very pleasant. In other words, we create a reality for ourselves that is so rigid and so routine that there's no joy left.
I'm not going to be like my father, yelling out the window for the birds to get off his lawn when he's 85.
Right,
That
exactly.
is not what I'm going to be. But so I was talking about the Death Cafe, that I've done. I had my daughter, I had my partner go there with me. It's
Uh,
every month they have this. And what it is you learn, you set up all your stuff, your will, trust, and all that stuff, but they don't do that there. You just talk about how you want it to be. So, for example, I don't want any medication at all. I
right.
know my partner would try to give it to me, and I know my partner would not pull the plug for me. So I have my three daughters involved, and
So do you
I
have the whole thing planned out and you're comfortable with that decision?
yes, and I've
Yeah.
told them I want my dogs in my bed next to me. I
Hmm.
want, very specific things. And
Hmm.
this is how it's going to go. And if I get to where I'm not functioning, I want you to help me
Go.
end end it the right way, a happy way. I'll say goodbye to everyone. And I've done that with my trust and my will with my children already. They know that I've helped them. So this is where your Aspie skills can actually benefit you by
Right.
using your brain to be organized and to be proactive. You can research things like this, figure
Hmm.
out and have it written out. You can do all these things so that your life works better and that you can have a happier
Right.
ending. And I
Mhm.
started a WhatsApp group with my kids called Happy Ending.
Right.
And
That's cute.
so we can talk about it, right?
Yeah. So I have one question for you left. And by the way, we're kind of rounding up our time here. I usually ask for summary of the session. I think you've done enough sessions with me to know that that's where I usually go. But on this particular topic, I'm more interested in this. What would you tell your younger self? What would you want your younger self to know? If you could take the information you have now and give your autistic younger self some insight, what would you tell yourself?
Well, I would have advocated to be in sports because I just gave up because my parents were so dysfunctional in the house.
Right. So you'd have been
I
more physical, you'd have
I would
been
have
more
said
athletic.
I would have said I want shoes, I want a tennis racket, and because I never asked for anything as a kid like
Right.
that. And I would have went on the team and I would have been really good and it would have been good for me. So I would have done that. I would have probably reached out more I watched my friends disappear as they knew how to call each other and socialize and do those things. I'd look out my window when I'm 17 and I'd watch my friends getting in cars and going off with new friends. And I didn't know how to do that. So I would have reached out, went across the street and talked to them, said, "Hey, what are you doing? Can I come with you?" I would have tried to do more of that. It would have been good for me. I was sort of suicidal at that age because of
Right.
not have all that disappearing. Then I would have not been afraid to ask questions. I didn't ask any questions in school because I was too embarrassed that would be wrong, and the answer would be wrong. And so I would ask questions and not be afraid of being wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I would have taken advantage more of the mentors I did have, which was my seventh grade teacher, who I still talk to,
Mm-hmm.
and my father's friend,
Mm-hmm.
who my father didn't do anything with, but I did. And I would have asked them more questions, asked them for more help. So
Yeah.
I would have gotten these
So what
resources.
would you have told your 20, 30, 40-year-old self?
Oh, I would have said, you need to get diagnosed.
Get diagnosed earlier.
Yeah, yeah. There's
Okay, what
something
else? What else?
not
Can you think
right
of any?
there.
Are there other things you would have told that you would have liked to have known or that you would tell yourself in, say, your
Yeah.
20s, 30s, early 40s?
Well, here's what I would have told myself. Michael, you're really good at the workaholism part. You're really good at physically taking care of your family, the house, providing every damn thing, being there, coaching the teams, but you're not taking care of yourself. You're not doing your gardening, you're not doing your painting, you don't have friends, you don't go physical exercise, you don't do any of the things you need to do to avoid your meltdowns, Michael, and that's why you're having trouble.
Mhm.
That's what I would have said, because that's really what happened. I would melt down Christmas Day after being so excited about it and planning it out, having the tree and everything perfect. Then I would fall apart like
Have a
an
meltdown
idiot.
and not enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah, and be like a jerk.
When
And
did you
everyone,
start painting? How old were you when you really started painting?
oh, 5.
So you were
That
painting when you were real little.
I paint, well, drew with pencil, but
When you
I
were
was
very young.
the only approval I got, mostly only from my mother.
Okay, so
And that
that wasn't
is
a new thing. Were there things that
so.
you added in your 50s and 60s that really added
Well,
to your
yeah.
quality of
Well,
life?
after I got diagnosed, well, when you see the art studio that I've built for myself, it's like a
Right.
house, like
Yeah.
a house. It's got a loft
Yeah.
and everything else. It's got everything. They even built like a big, huge counter. I can paint 4 things at a time. And they're going to build this mechanism that comes down from the ceiling where I can put my canvases on it. Mexicans can do anything. And anyway, but what happened with me after I got diagnosed, I used to do like just black and white, like sort of like in the back there on your wall on the
Hmm.
left. Just
Yeah,
sort of
like
like
this one. Yeah.
yeah, sort of like almost like drawings like that of
Hmm.
landscape usually or buildings. And it went like this, pshoo, like the color. You see this back here? It's probably one of, I don't know, 8 or 10 paintings I did, smaller ones while I was in New Zealand. I have gotten used to just being able to sit. Like if I have a painting going in this house, I don't have one going yet because I just moved here 2 days ago, but I will. I can go to that for 10 minutes at a time and add to it and go buy it. And I'm working on it. And they say, well, how do you get all this work done? Well, I just do 10 to 15 minutes at a time.
Real
And then
incremental.
and you
There's
and
a
you
repeating theme here, right?
you see things in it if you leave it alone.
Mhm.
Like if you notice back here, okay, down here,
Yeah.
there's that little area where it looks like water
Yeah.
was sort of an accident.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah. And
said,
like
well,
a
like
little marsh, almost looks like a little marshy area.
I
Yeah.
added that in. It wasn't in the picture.
Which
So
adds a tremendous amount of interest and depth to that picture,
I
actually.
think so. I really
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that. Anyway, so I think that, like you said, I think the key element is incremental.
Yeah.
One thing at a time, one day at a time.
Small steps, small bites. Yeah.
Yeah, and then switching it up. So for example, after this, since I've been sitting, I'll go exercise a little bit, maybe walk my dogs a little bit. They're in the closet here. It's a big closet. And then I'll go check on the electrician, see if he's doing what I want him to do,
Right.
go up and check on the other guys on the roof. And then, I have the afternoon, I'm gonna rewrite
Could you
another.
have done this while you were still working? Because I know you worked full time until not that many years ago.
I couldn't sit at a desk and be an administrator. I had real hard time with it.
Right. But could
Uh,
you have done some of these changes, these
oh,
incremental changes
definitely,
while you were still
definitely.
employed?
Yeah. In fact, my son has sort of altered the way they do business a little bit. He has stand-up meetings in the morning.
Right.
And
So now your
guess what?
son is picking up some of these things as the new
The stand-up meetings is
CEO of
really
Health
good. It's
Internship
like
Project.
a
Yeah.
it's like a lightning round. What I call a lightning round is, okay, what's happening for you today? What do you have to get done? And what help do you need? And then
Right.
2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
10 people standing up, having their coffee. And he doesn't even have, most of the people don't even work in office anymore. I think his new personnel fact person is from Wisconsin.
Right.
And his admissions
What's
person
online? Yeah.
lives somewhere in Florida, not even near one of our programs. He's so good at that. COVID was a huge benefit for him and me. I traveled the whole world. I went to countries that let me in, like
That's right.
Egypt.
I remember that. I
Like
remember it was your
I,
opportunity to
I
get on the
spent a
plane.
month in Egypt and no one was there. So you go to the pyramids and you had no lines at all. No one, not even one person, two
Right.
people. And so it was great. And
Yeah.
just wear a mask, keep the windows
But again,
open.
another taking an opportunity to really reach outside of your comfort zone and do something new, something you love, and something you always wanted to do. And I think if
Yeah,
there's a theme here that we take out of this session is that to live your higher life, to live your best
be,
life,
being
whether you're
courageous.
neurotypical or neurodivergent or somewhere on the spectrum or not, it's the stretch. It's being able to stretch outside
Exactly.
of your routines and your habits and your rigidity to do the things that you really want to do before it's too late to do them.
Yeah, so I did 3 sculptures with the metal from the house,
Mm-hmm.
two light fixtures, and one
Yeah,
of the sculptures came out crappy out of 5 things.
right. But you got four cool ones. Yeah,
Whatever, you know what I mean?
yeah,
So there you
exactly.
go. Accept your
Well, yeah,
losses.
I think you're an inspiration to us, Michael, and I really
Thanks.
appreciate. Um, I think your information is valuable to everyone, but I would agree that what you're really talking about is especially hard for individuals on the spectrum. But I think you give us a really nice. It's more than just the information. It's you're the role model of how to do it, and I appreciate that position because I think we sometimes need a role model to remind us how we can live a better life and a happier life and a more fulfilled life. So
Yeah,
thank you for that.
one of the things that women used to say to me after I would speak would be, Dr. McManmon, how can I get my husband? I know he's really wonderful. I love him. He's so intelligent,
But he
creative.
won't get off the couch.
He won't go anywhere with me. He won't go to
Right.
Florida. He won't travel. He won't do anything. He won't eat this. He won't do that. How can I get him to, you've been doing all this? And I said, well, while he's got to see it for himself, you can give him a book, or you can, if he's
Right.
open
He's
to
got to have the
read.
desire. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, because they'd be so miserable. These women were holding on, keep staying in their marriage because they really had
Mhm.
these wonderful features of this guy, but they were
Right.
like really pretty miserable because they couldn't do anything because he's shut down,
Right. Yeah.
terrible.
Well, thank you, Michael. I really,
Yep.
it has been a really helpful session for me. And like I say, even, just thinking about it for my own personal self, just
So
some
what are you going
things
to
that I
commit
could
to?
do.
What
Huh?
are you going to commit to? What are you going to
I
commit to?
I have an art background too. I actually went to college on an art scholarship, paid my way through college on an art scholarship,
Oh,
and
there you
haven't
go.
picked up a brush or done a thing with art. So
There you
I'm gonna
go.
start dabbling again.
Cool.
That's my change. That's my change commitment is I'm gonna start dabbling my art again,
Okay. Well,
at
we'll
least
see
once a
about
week.
that.
How's that?
We're
A
gonna check
formal
in
goal. At
on.
least once a week, dabble in my art.
There you go.
Thank you. I think that's a good way to end this one. Hey, I appreciate your time and we look forward. We appreciate everything you do for us at US Autism as an advisory board member speaker. Michael has a number of sessions, both in this conference as well as in the library in general, multiple books, multiple resources. So please check out his speaker page for kind of full access to that content. And we appreciate you being with us. And thank you, everyone, and have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
You too. Have a great day.